When you're looking at the structure of the pelvis, you have to consider the structure and you have to consider movement and what you're after. There are wonderful aspects of SPML and there's wonderful aspects of hip surgery. It is what it is. Wish we didn't have to have these discussions for Thermunchkins, but we do. I look at the structure of the pelvis. Going back to my days of architecture, you have to go into the arch of the pelvis, and let me explain. Again, simple anatomy of the pelvis is one thing. You have to understand it for structure, for movement. Now, I don't have all the information here because I don't have a spinal x-ray, and you should have one too, and note that as well. But when you're looking at the arch, I look at this as the keystone area being the sacrum, right? The legs of it going into our legs and the load going into the pelvis, which looks similar to this. This is a more developed pelvis, an older pelvis, but the pelvis should load up, right? And support that not only the weight, but that's the walking, that what needs to be done. And I know somebody might say, there's no chance your child's going to walk. That's not the point. You still need the structure there. It doesn't matter if you're from whatever country, if whatever, the hips are meant to be there for a reason. And when they're not, there's complications. Again, another way of looking at it is, again, housing, that it creates this perpendicular structure, right? But that's housed into the pelvis from the legs. So the hips don't go right into the spine, right? But that movement is there to create the movement in the body. So now when you have your daughter's hips, you're looking at and concentrating on the subluxation of the left hip. What's not being looked at, I don't believe, is the whole structure of it. That hip is not there to produce, but you also have coccyvalga of the legs, where the legs have gone straight, and you also have incomplete ischium. So sitting is very difficult, not only with the leg being out, but sitting in general. Looking at this more here, and you can see that the hips themselves are not supporting the pelvis, right? From the sit bones, which are the sit bones down in the body. When I'm down here, these is the sit bones, right? Down and through here. So even the right hip, even though the hip is in, the coccyvalga that is there producing the lack of a femoral arch is supporting a scoliosis, and that's where you're getting the curve, right? And now you have the subluxations here with the complete coccyvalga, and that's what's happening is the leg's gone straight and it's pulling the hip out. So this conversation really has to be taken in regards. SPML is amazing, but at the same time too, you don't have the structure there of the femurs. And that conversation is going to have to be hardcore with Yuzo or Ingvi or both, or however you're going about it. I could show you this in a larger kiddos. What I mean by that, if you look at the presentations of where the hips are supporting into the pelvis, right, this is where the curvature is, right? That's what you have. And even though the hips are done, let's say, and again, I'll go into another child, and this is where you're seeing the curvature, but I can't map yours out because I don't have the full picture. This is where I look at the structure. Here's another child. See where the hips are, same, very similar. See where the scoliosis is starting to hit. So again, to work on hips and not understand that when you don't work on hips, because a child is ambulatory or we don't think that they're going to have functions of movement, do we want the scoliosis surgery? Do we want those kind of other things that are presented due to these complications? And that's the full picture that you're looking at with this surgery. A lot of people do jump because they don't want the hips done, and they do jump to SPML. But again, you have subluxation, and this conversation needs to go into the next measures. If we're having it, if we're going to leave it, if we leave it as is, the scoliosis is presenting. There's just no way around it because the hip is not there to support the spine or the pelvis. So the spine is sitting there and it has no direction. By not regarding the hips and doing the scoliosis surgery, you still have the curvature wanting to happen because the hips aren't there to support the spine's movement. Is it SPML to take away some of the spasticity, which some people believe? That's why the hip is out. and buy us some more time. I have clients that have done that. SPML is great, but are the hips too far gone for the conversation of SPML? This has got to be reviewed with professionals like Ingvi and Nuzo and going into your orthopedist. Thanks. Please remember, by the way, I'm not a doctor. I'm here to discuss the movement of your child. The professional team is number one as far as your conversations you're going for, what is going to be done to help the hips, or what are you doing? Some people do leave them sublux. Some people go in to do the SPML, and some people go full on to have the hip replaced or placed in. And that will, when you're having that conversation, the conversation of changing the femoral angle needs to have that conversation. Otherwise, that migration is just going to continue. But you don't even have a femoral arch, or the hip joint to go into the arch isn't there. It's compromised. And so that's what you're looking at most likely. But just so you know the options of where it is and how it's going to affect your daughter's movements. Thanks.